Today is Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. President Trump continues his push to broker an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me now to get through all of the news going on today, CBN's Trey Phillips and Madison Seals. And we're going to start with the focus story. We've got some high school students who are helping Hurricane Helene victims get back on their feet.
Yeah, this is an impressive group of students, both talented and good-hearted, and they're working to rebuild their community. So it's a really uplifting and inspiring story.
Looking forward to the details there. Also coming up on the main thing, Dr. Raymond Wiggins is on a mission to warn people about the dangers of marijuana. He joined Billy to talk about that. That's today's main thing. All of that's coming up. Make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts as well. You can do that in the description here of this episode. We've got all the links in there. Make sure you're checking those out. All right, with that, we are going to head to the news in 90. And a Delta Airlines flight from Minneapolis to Toronto crash-landed at Toronto Pearson International Airport yesterday. The aircraft flipped upside down upon landing on a snow-covered runway. Emergency teams responded promptly, confirming that all passengers and crew members have been accounted for. At least 8 individuals had injuries, with one reportedly in critical condition. Incident came after a heavy winter storm over the weekend that left about 9 inches of snow at the airport. And U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff will lead U.S. talks in Saudi Arabia aimed at ending the Ukraine war. The meeting follows President Trump's call with Vladimir Putin signaling a shift towards diplomacy. Rubio emphasized that Ukraine and Europe must be involved in any real deal, countering earlier remarks that suggested otherwise. Trump's approach departs from past policies, prioritizing direct negotiation over prolonged military aid. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ruled out U.S. troops in Ukraine and said NATO membership for Ukraine is not part of the deal. Those are just some of today's top stories. You can check out more over at cbnnews.com. And so obviously the weather played a role in this latest airline incident. Thankfully, it looks like everybody's there's one in critical condition there, but everybody else is gonna be okay. But man, is it making you nervous to fly at this point? I mean, it's kind of getting crazy out there. I mean, I don't know if we're just on a heightened alert because of all the crashes, and so every maybe incident that perhaps wouldn't have made national news does now. But weather did seem to play a factor in this one with all that snow. And I know here in my neck of the woods in the east, we're getting crazy wind after all this rain. And so there's and I know snow's coming my way here later this week. So yeah, there's some crazy weather going on, but the airline incidents just keep on coming.
Yeah, I think these airline situations are a little bit scary. It does make you a little bit nervous, right? To hop on a plane just not knowing what could happen. But I think it's a good reminder, right, that these things are they can happen. You never know when something might happen. So not to make it sound too spiritual, but always be spiritually where you should be with the Lord, because life is fragile and these situations are scary and can happen anywhere and at any time. So I'm grateful that it doesn't seem like there's been any fatalities in this latest incident. But also, I think more pragmatically and practically, what in the world is going on? I think we need to study this and figure out, is there some sort of miscommunication happening? Is somebody missing the mark that's causing some of these issues? Because all of these flights are so technologically maneuvered now, right? I think a lot of it is just done by computers. So I think maybe look into, are there some errors here that we could avoid to keep these incidents from happening?
Yeah. After the DC plane crash, there were so many questions circulating about if the cause was DEI hires, technical failures, or just purely an accident, which are all questions that we should be asking after any tragedy. I don't think any question should be off limits when there's a tragedy of that degree. And thankfully, in this case, there were no casualties, but it does make you ask the question. In the day of social media and information overload, it's hard to tell if there are actually more crashes or if the media is just reporting on more of them now following the DC plane crash. And it's kind of a question of confirmation bias. But either way, like you were saying, Trey, it's a good reminder that the Lord has numbered our steps. So whether or not we step on a plane, if that's when it's our time to go see the Lord, he's going to call us up to him. But if not, then he will protect us. And I think that's a hope and a peace that we get to carry with us as Christians. But I can't imagine living in this world and seeing all of this and not having that hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and that is how we should walk. And that's good imagery there. And I think of times when I've been on planes and I see people that are so overcome with anxiety, they're freaking out about it. And, I think it's a call as Christians to have peace, like you said, Madison, in all these situations, knowing that we don't get to pick the day or the time we're called home, right? So how can we live that way, walk that out, and then hopefully impart that and share that with other people? So we'll be praying for that for sure. All right. We're going to head over to the focus story now. Some high school students are helping Hurricane Helene victims. It's been a while and they're still in need, and they're helping them get back on their feet. So who are the students and what's the story here?
Yeah, so this is a group of about 18 seniors at Mountain Heritage High School in Burnsville, North Carolina, and they're all in an honors carpentry class together. And the school has a construction training facility on campus, which is really nice. My high school definitely didn't have that, where the students learn to craft and create structures like homes. And the school partnered recently with an organization called Rebuilding Haulers, which was created by a realtor named Stephanie Johnson in the aftermath of the storm. And kind of the motto of this organization is locals helping locals. And the way it works is that Rebuilding Haulers uses donations from people to purchase home building materials. And then they send these materials to the carpentry facility at the high school, where this group of seniors goes to work building a home. And right now they're working on turning a wooden frame in the middle of the workshop into a 650 square foot home for a Yancey County storm victim who lost their home in the storm. But they're not stopping with just one. This high school hopes to keep the partnership going for at least the next several years. And they're working at a rate of about 2 to 4 tiny homes a year, which is pretty impressive.
What are the students saying about this project?
Yeah, so one of the really important aspects of this whole partnership is that all of the students were affected by the hurricane too. So it goes back to the organization's motto, locals helping locals, because nothing makes you want to put your heart and your soul into something more than helping your own community kind of come back to life. And the carpentry teacher overseeing all of the work says the students bought into this project right away. They got so excited to help out and get to put their skills into practice. And a few of the students have commented on the project saying they're proud knowing that they're able to help and actively change somebody's life that's in need. And they can't wait to see the final project and actually see the person living and thriving in their new home. And the teacher echoed some of those same thoughts and said it was a perfect marriage of the two to come together and collaborate with the students and the community to give back right there in Yancey County. And that's really what's so special about this program, is that it's a partnership within a community that all suffered devastating losses together. And this is a community that has largely been disappointed and let down by the Biden and Harris administration for the lack of funding, assistance, or attention, really, in the months following the actual storm itself. Some North Carolina residents said they had seen no signs of FEMA or other government agencies until President Trump visited after his inauguration and promised to send help for the rebuilding efforts. So at this point, this community is rebuilding itself. The community spirit, the dedication, and the hard work is there. They could just use more materials and more hands.
Yeah. And I know people were frustrated when, the word was essentially, oh, you're going to get $700 from the federal government. If you're lucky, you'll get that. And then that seemed like about it. And then you get these people essentially abandoned. And I talked to Haley Henson from Operation Blessing recently about this. And she was there and showing me some of the areas that are still just not rebuilt. They're completely wiped out by the insane amount of water that came through there and just ripped roughshod through the whole area, just destroyed everything in its path. And so people lost everything, and they lost their town squares and their communities and, where they would gather and things like that. So there is just so much need there. And then how the media does, they sort of feast on something for a while, then move on. And that's sort of what happened there. And it didn't last in the spotlight. And so you left these people, and then they have this need. And I know Operation Blessing is still there. They're in it for the long run. So that's one place you can go to help, ob.org. But it's great to see people on the local level realizing, hey, we have to step up and do something where we can. And that's when we're at our best, I think, truthfully, is when we're not just sitting there waiting. I mean, obviously the federal government is huge and they should help where they can, but we shouldn't just be waiting for the federal government. We should be going, you know what? Like the Cajun Navy, just, I'm going to go and help however I can. And like, that's always the best form of help, when it's neighbor to neighbor and it's the most personal way. And it's beneficial for obviously the people being helped, but also the people helping. So great to see them using their talents this way.
Like you said, the media so quickly moves on from these things, but the damage is still being cleaned up. The impacts are still being felt in so many of these communities. I was even seeing on Facebook the other day of somebody who had traveled recently toward North Carolina, toward some of these areas that were so devastated by the hurricane. There are huge billboards with the names of towns, like, please come and visit these towns, because some of their systems are back up. They're back and operating with Airbnbs and hotels and restaurants and gift shops, but they are so desperate for tourism money, because that is just how those little towns have survived. But people aren't visiting them anymore because of the devastation with these hurricanes, and people still thinking they're probably still reeling from all of the damage, but they're saying, look, we've gotten things back open. Please come and visit us, because our economy needs visitors.
Madison, any final thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, that's true. And I think another cool aspect of this is it's rare to be able to apply your education in productive, hands-on ways while in high school. But I think there should be more grants for things like this, programs teaching real skills and actually helping pour back into the communities with the tools that are learned.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Instead of just taking home like a key hanger or something like that you make in the wood shop, do something really useful. And that's, I think, will spur a lot of kids and their imaginations, not only on what they can create, but how they can help. And of course, it's always a rewarding feeling when you do that, as some of those students you mentioned, Madison, said. And it's going to just kind of have a snowball effect, right? Like, you do that once and then you're going to want to do it again, because you experience such a wonderful experience that you're going to want to continue to do it. So good stuff there. Thank you so much for bringing it to the podcast today. Really cool to hear that. All right, we're going to go to the main thing now. And as I mentioned at the top, Dr. Raymond Wiggins is on a mission to warn people about the dangers of marijuana. Well, he joined Billy to talk about that issue for today's main thing.
Dr. Wiggins, we know your passion for this topic, and it's an incredibly important topic. What was the impetus? You spoke a little bit about this before, but what was the impetus that led you into this level of investigation?
Well, marijuana is very personal to me. I have 3 close relatives who died young, and I have no doubt that they would be here today if not for marijuana. They were very heavy marijuana users, and one died just a few years ago of a sudden heart attack after many years of smoking marijuana. Also, a very close family member of mine, a young man who was a Christian young man. He got in with a group of guys who were smoking marijuana, and he thought, hey, everybody's doing it. Everybody seems to be okay. So why not? And he started smoking it. And after only 2 times, his second time, he developed really severe cannabis-induced psychosis, wound up in a psychiatric hospital, and he was never able to return to school. And that's the personal side. Then there's the professional side. I see a pattern of anxiety in my patients who smoke marijuana. Almost all of them who check the box that says that they smoke marijuana also check the box that says they have significant anxiety. Also, it takes about 3 times more propofol to keep these patients sedated than those who don't use marijuana. And it takes about 60% more pain medication after surgery to keep them comfortable. And so seeing the effects in my patients, my family, my friends, I began investigating the subject, and what I found just absolutely shocked me. I was just blown away by the amount of medical literature that was out there about this subject, and it doesn't go along with what you hear from Snoop Dogg and all the celebrities that are out there, and much of the media. It really is very different than what you hear out there.
You know, reading the book, the thing that struck me the most was the level to which, and it was meticulous. You went through these studies, you brought them together, and I've said this a couple of times today, I can't emphasize it enough. I don't think anybody's done the level of analysis that you have on the available data. It is shocking that the data is available and that nobody seems to be looking at it except you are now, and some other researchers are, but you've really brought this together. When you think about the personal, as you detailed, and then the professional, what most concerns you about this hyper-normalization of marijuana?
Well, when weed is normalized, that means that more people are going to use it. Studies show that if you don't believe that it's a big deal, that you're somewhere between 6 to 22 times more likely to use than those who believe that it's going to cause issues. And so we're going to see a lot more physical health issues, mental health issues, spiritual issues, and it not only affects those who use it, but it affects the family members who are grieving over all of the problems that their family members are having, maybe over the death. And it even affects people that the user has never met, because there's close to 10,000 car accidents, fatal car accidents per year due to marijuana. So with normalization, we're going to see a lot more devastating and deadly effects.
Yeah, you hear this argument often. It's like, well, I would rather be with, a person who's happy and calm, high, than I would be a person who's drunk, and you hear, and again, it's this diminishing of what's actually going on. And so when I think about that, I come back to the physical. You were giving those numbers of how much more pain medication it takes for your patients, how much more, that's alarming on about 50 different levels. But when it comes to the physical impact of marijuana, as you were investigating, you were going down, looking at that, what were the things that shocked you the most in those findings?
Well, I found so many things that really shocked me, but probably the two things that shocked me the most were the heart effects and the epigenetic effects, and we were talking about this a while ago.
It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. I had no idea that marijuana would cause the heart effects that it does. For an hour after smoking marijuana, you have a 5 times risk of a heart attack. I have a story in my book of a young man who started smoking marijuana because he had Crohn's disease, and he thought, hey, this is going to be the thing that's going to help me. He started reading about it. He was a brilliant young man. He started reading about it. He got into a lot of books that talked about the use of marijuana in Crohn's disease. And so he talked to his parents about it. His parents were not on board at first, and then they're like, okay, well, let's just try it, because he had severe disease, Crohn's disease. Well, what they didn't know is that it was really harming his heart, and after just a few months, he began developing a severe heart arrhythmia, and he felt it a few times, but he didn't know what it was, and then he just died suddenly. Imagine the guilt that his parents had, because they felt like they literally killed their son. That's how they felt. No, they didn't kill their son, but that's how they felt, because they were on board with him using marijuana to help with his Crohn's disease. So there's severe heart effects, and I go into that in great detail in the book. The other thing that really fascinated me is something called epigenetics, and that's a sub-study in genetics. And if you look at genetics, our genetic makeup is very stable throughout life. But the epigenetics, that's all of the things that control our genes. And so it's proteins, there's many things that control our genes. That changes a lot throughout life, and this is a really hot topic now with neurologists. What they found is that the epigenetic makeup changes significantly with marijuana, very significantly. And it not only affects those who use, but it affects their children, their children's children, all the way down to the 4th generation. What do you remember from the book of Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy? The sins of the fathers will be upon the sons to the 3rd and the 4th generation. So it's amazing how the Bible meshes with science when you really look at it.
It's another example of the Bible being proven true,
Right.
which we know it is, but being proven true through science, which is what you expect to happen when you do science the right way and you look at things the right way. One of the things when it comes to the medical field in science and this topic that has been very interesting are the claims that marijuana in some way treats mental health, right? That people who are struggling with mental health issues, that marijuana is the thing that they need to take in some form to help them cope. What did you find once you started digging into that?
Yeah, science is definitely against that. If you look at the American Psychiatric Association, they tell you that there is absolutely no data that shows that marijuana should be used for any psychiatric or mental health issue. In fact, science leads us absolutely in the opposite direction. Marijuana will increase anxiety, it increases depression, it increases bipolar disorder, it increases psychosis, and you can just go on and on. Again, I told you about the young man who's a close family member of mine who had cannabis-induced psychosis. That's acute. That's something that happens very quickly, but also it leads to long-term schizophrenia as well. So there are so many reasons that you should never use marijuana for a mental health issue.
All right, Billy, thanks for that conversation there. Important stuff as always. And that's going to leave us with time on the pod today for one last thing.
Yeah, today we're looking at a really simple but powerful verse. 1 Corinthians 14:33 says, "For God is not a God of disorder, but of peace." And I think this verse reminds us this world of war and tragedy is not the world that God created for us to live in. And we get to look forward to experiencing his peaceful, perfect world one day, but he does grant us peace to deal with the hard parts of this life.
I think there's so much in life that is chaotic and it's hard to understand. So it's nice to know that when we turn to God, it doesn't mean we're going to understand the ins and outs of everything, but we can know that he is the God of peace and the God of order, and we can hand those difficult things over to him.
Amen. Good a spot as any to leave it on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com. Get your news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, and that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. God bless. We'll see you then.